Welcome to More Than a Muse. I'm Sadie.
And I'm Stauney. Guys, we're having technical issues. So we're going to try our best with this episode, but we're having some problems. But this is the beginning of March. It's Women's History Month. This is our month. It's the month that we love to focus on March Madness or Feminine Rage all month long. And we have episodes that we're doing this entire month all focused on the media and how that affects women and affects the way women are portrayed and the way that they are portrayed when they're angry, especially, or frustrated. So we're really excited about it if we can get everything to work.
Technical problems that unfortunately will come up when you are recording podcast episodes across the country. We have platforms that we use and everything has always worked perfectly for the last couple of years. And now this week we're running into issues. No worries. So we'll do our best to edit this, make this as coherent as possible, even if our audio is lagging a bit. Hopefully we don't sound like we're interrupting each other.
Or that we just have no idea what the other person said. That's going to be the biggest issue. Be like, wait, I'm sorry. Please repeat that entire sentence. Oh, gosh.
We're going to do our best, but we couldn't put off a March episode because, like you said, it's Women's History Month. It's the beginning of our March Madness. And this month, I'm excited because our theme for, I guess, this year's March Madness is all about media madness. And so today we're talking about the phenomenon of trial by talk show, which is something is that I don't feel like it was like on my radar until when we've only just found 4 today that we're going to really talk about. But it made me realize that this is actually a pattern. And it was interesting to dive into and watch some of these famous interviews, I guess, from these women and with the added context that years have provided.
Yeah, definitely. I think like we've all gotten a little bit more aware of some of those talk show incidents with Dr. Phil, some of those viral moments, Bad Baby and everything like that. But just even the way that regular interviews would happen with people that they would poll on and kind of what the power that had at the time before this predates the internet for most of these. So it's like people did not have a place to go and have discourse or to platform themselves. They couldn't just hop on an Instagram story and be like, hey guys, I was misunderstood. This is what I meant. So this is how people would come out and make statements, was go on these talk shows and sometimes be completely eviscerated by the hosts.
Absolutely. To give you a sneak peek as to what's happening for the rest of the month, we're going to be talking about tabloids, talk shows today, paparazzi, and maybe how TikTok has shaped public narratives about women, how the media turns their pain into a spectacle, and I don't know, kind of seeing like how the machine works, who benefits from it, and why women are the ones who are so often paying the price. So I think it's going to be really interesting and obviously very relevant because media is, we can't escape it.
No, we cannot. So to start off, why on earth were talk shows so appealing to people? Like I mentioned, it was a way for people to platform each other or platform themselves right off the bat. But one other reason was it was a release from constraints. It was outside of more mainstream ways of getting news out. Like you didn't have to have a full like press team and sit down and be like, okay, I'm holding a press conference. This is what happened. You were able to get out of that regular scheduled programming of like professional news or political discourse and have an area where you could talk about anything. And talk show producers claimed that they were performing that public service by offering a cathartic release and a national platform for hitherto unexplored social issues. However, a lot of critics would claim that producers were mainstreaming hatred and pornography into U.S. public life, depending on what they were talking about on those talk shows. Another thing was like there was a lot of distrust of official sources. This is something I thought was interesting, especially after the assassination of President John F. Kennedy, which there's so many conspiracy theories surrounding that today, but I didn't realize how early a lot of those started and that there was already like a very early distrust from the Kennedy assassination of the public, of the official version of things that were fed to the public from like politicians, newspapers, and like the 3 broadcast television networks that they had at the time. And so the talk show was the way to get your news outside of the official source. Like it was a way that you could get the real story per se. And then lastly, it was like gladiator fights.
Yes.
Talk show culture was popular for its frank sensuality, candor, and slapstick entertainment value, but also for the satisfaction of settling partisan sources. You have Jerry Springer, who would ambush their guests with surprise confrontations. And it would also just create this whole morality play of who's the villain, who's the hero, what's the story. And you just get to sit and watch the mess happen in real time. And we as a society happen to be big fans of that. And that's why gladiator fights were so popular back in ancient Rome. And that is
Big
why
fans.
reality TV is so popular now.
Yeah. And guilty is charged. I love me some reality TV. And what I found, I think, so interesting is like talking about reality TV and talk show hosts. Like, you see that format. I just finished this last season of Traitors. And after the end of the Traitors, they had a reunion episode. And I think it's so common for these type of shows to have these reunion episodes after, because I think not only do people want the drama that happened on screen during the show, but now they want the reactions now that everyone's seen the whole show and they want to see them fight it out. So it's like funny how that continues through as media and TV changes, but people want the fights. They always want the fights.
Yeah, people don't change as much as we think we do.
That's we hopefully we've just become a more civilized in some ways. So today we're going to be talking about 4 different famous talk show moments, or like when a woman had the opportunity to set the record straight. We're going to be talking about Monica Lewinsky, Whitney Houston, Meghan Markle, and Tonya Harding. And with each of these women and each of these moments, there was definitely a first scandal that happened. And then also with that scandal, there was definitely this villain narrative that was associated with each of these women that the media definitely latched onto. So then comes the interview, and a lot of these were very highly broadcasted, highly requested, and were very famous, like provided this opportunity for her to set the record straight. But I think what's interesting and like seeing the backlash of those interviews or those acceptances of the interviews, like how did the public take it? What are the rules then for those women? How does a woman need to behave in media and on a talk show for her apology to be accepted? And apology in quotations, because as I'm sure we'll discuss, that a lot of times these women didn't really have anything to apologize for. They just found themselves at the center of a media circus that eventually they felt like they had to address.
So first off, we're going to be talking about Monica Lewinsky, which I feel like all of us know a little bit about it. She was so notorious for so long. And recently she's come back into the public eye again. There's a limited series that we'll be watching this month for our cultural canon, actually, called Impeachment, that is about her and her whole story. As well as she actually just did a recently like a Call Her Daddy interview, which I didn't have a chance to watch, but I was like, oh, she was on Call Her Daddy. I think like last year or something. So she's come back into the public view again. But initially, what brought her up and made her a public figure was she had an affair with President Bill Clinton while he was in office, and she was a White House intern. And usually an affair is like a big deal, but it wouldn't make news headlines per se. But it was the president of the United States.
It was the president,
So it got really big really fast. And unfortunately, she was only 22 when it happened, but the entire nation attacked her as if she was the one that was responsible for everything. Letting some of my personal feelings get in there immediately by letting you know that, holy crap, they attacked her in a way that I don't think was really fitting for the scenario, considering that both of them were to blame, as every affair partner is to blame for also causing an affair. But she was the focus of so much. It dominated headlines. It reshaped American political discourse. There were Saturday Night Live sketches about her. There were jokes on every single talk show, every single late night show. She was the sole focus of the media for quite a while. And after becoming like this punchline in the media, and being cast as like a homewrecker and a seductress and being the most mocked woman in America, like truly the most mocked woman in America at the time, with it even leading to the impeachment of Bill Clinton. She sat down with Barbara Walters for an interview in 1999, which was a couple of years after. She did the interview at age 25. And 70 million people watched this interview. It continues to be, I think, one of the most watched interviews in TV history. It was the most watched TV interview at the time. It's the most watched out of the four we'll talk about today because so many people sat down to listen to what she had to say about this. And she was 25. Like,
it is crazy as I have gotten older to then realize the ages of these women who were under such intense scrutiny, and like to be able to like contextualize that now, you know, because like when you're like 12 years old and you hear about these stories, like a 25-year-old woman, you're like, wow, she's old. No. And then you get to be 25 and you're like, I know nothing about anything. And I'm sure we'll talk about it because I know that I think in the wake of the Me Too movement, like people were finally willing to reconsider what happened there and the way we talked about that. And like when you realize it was a 22-year-old and the president of the United States, it's, oh, what? Why were we mad at her? Like, sure, everyone can make their own choices, but obviously there is an incredible power imbalance that's going on here that, like, why was she the one we were mad at and ridiculing for all of this? It's just insane.
I was shocked when I found out how young she was because, like, growing up and hearing the story, completely different perspective. Like you said, like, just did not even comprehend. And it made me feel bad for her in so many ways. Like, I already did, but then realizing how young she was and not getting sympathy from older adults in that situation at that time period. Like, to not have older women be like, oh, I'm 50, you're 22. I understand how something like this could happen and you should not be completely at fault for this. Like, totally. What? So unfair to her. Yeah. So it's crazy. But the saddest part too is that, like, she talks about it in the interview. She didn't even come out and publicly state, I had an affair with Bill Clinton, and then it went everywhere. She confided in a friend, and her friend recorded the conversation and then sent it into the FBI. And then they basically, like, I don't know, like, not arrested her, but interrogated her. And then, like, it led to the whole thing with, there's that famous soundbite of Bill Clinton saying, I did not have sexual relations with that woman. So it led to the whole media frenzy around it and him lying about everything and them kind of being like cross-examined. And then I think it led to an actual trial of some kind because she had to like put forth this dress that had some liquids on it that had stained the dress as proof that they had actually had a sexual relations. And the dress became like a huge thing. And so many people began to mock her about that. And it was like a whole punchline on all the talk shows about the dress and like, why'd she keep it and all this stuff. And so in the interview, she had to go through and explain, I didn't realize it was stained when I took it off. I hung it up in my closet. And then like after I realized it was stained, it didn't fit me anymore. So then I didn't bother to send it out for dry cleaning because I wasn't going to wear it. But then it became this like whole hallmark thing of thank heavens she had the dress because it proved her story was true. But she like hated it at the same time because it became such a punchline. Who keeps something like that? And then the people were like, she's so weird. She kept a trophy, all this stuff. It just spiraled out of control.
That is crazy because I don't know. Tell me you haven't kept something that got stained. I don't know. Like you don't even realize, and then you just like, oh, I don't want to go through the trouble of getting rid of it, and it feels weird to throw something away that was once nice. I don't know. It's funny how people will like assign such intense meanings to something when most of the times the choices that we make in our life are like passive. Oh, I just don't feel like dealing with this right now, so I'm gonna just keep it, and then it's not like she was like some weird master creepy manipulator with her trophy. And I don't think most people think like that. So I don't know.
I know. Weird. They made it into such a weird thing. And then even just some of the questions that I think Barbara Walters was like generally pretty nice to her. And I heard from this interview, they actually went on to have a really long friendship. But some of the questions that she had to ask her were just like so uncomfortable for such a young girl to answer and just awkward. They talked about the fact that they actually didn't ever have like intercourse, but they had like sexual relations. So they had to like talk about the difference between that. And this is all on live TV. And then also just like she mentioned that she had struggles with her weight her whole life. And then Barbara Walters has to bring up how that's become a punchline for the public. And people were like, she's not even that pretty, or she's so fat. Like, why would he have any interest in her, and all this stuff. So then she's getting mocked publicly for the way she looks because people are like, she's not pretty enough to sleep with. It doesn't matter to people. It doesn't really have anything to do with it. You don't have to be like publicly viewed as the prettiest person on the planet for someone to have an affair with you. It doesn't work like that. And then even just I think a lot of it showed how young she was. She giggled a lot and got really uncomfortable or would like make like little jokes. And I could see how maybe at the time people would have taken that as her not taking it so seriously, because so many people at the time treated this like she had scandalized the nation. Like, because it was the president of the United States, this got turned into like a, you've ruined the first family, you've destroyed our reputation as a country. So much got blamed on her. And because of the way she was acting, I could see how maybe if you look at it through that lens, someone would be like, she's not taking this seriously. She doesn't see what she did and all this stuff. But then if you look back at it and realize this was a 22-year-old intern who had an affair with her married boss.
Yeah.
Who just so happened to be the president of the United States of America.
Her very powerful boss. Yeah.
Like, how horrible. Worst case scenario, of course. It wasn't her first married affair either. She had a previous affair with a married man. And so that got dragged into the public. So it was a really eye-opening interview. I'm glad I like finally watched it after so many years of hearing the story and then getting to like actually see the whole interview. And I do think as far as talk show hosts go, Barbara Walters was nicer than she could have been.
Okay.
But I also think that it was just the questions and the comments and the jokes that were made about her and everything just showed how publicly eviscerated Monica Lewinsky was. Like, they no holds barred to the point where she was on antidepressants and had to talk about that. She had her mom on watching her on suicide watch for a while to make sure that she didn't do anything because of how bad the media and public backlash had gotten for all of this. It just goes to show that like she was completely criminalized by society for this, and this talk show was her chance to come out and put forth any kind of statement on the matter publicly. And sadly, like,
totally,
it really didn't change the narrative too much until, like you mentioned, the Me Too movement. And then when all of that came forward, and then with a lot of the things that we've gotten from her recently with recent interviews or the impeachment limited series, then people started to realize like how mistreated she was in all of this, and how we should have been holding the married man who was the president of the United States a little bit more accountable than the 22-year-old intern. So crazy, like the craziest situation. Yeah.
The first person I'm going to talk about is Whitney Houston. And of course, Whitney Houston's one of the most successful, influential vocalists of our time. And I actually was interested to go back and watch this because I would say Whitney Houston's like a little bit before our time. Obviously, she rose to fame in the 1980s, 1990s, and obviously like I know her biggest songs. But I wasn't necessarily aware of the media storm and attention that had surrounded her when she was at her peak. And so it was interesting to get a window into that with this interview and with how she managed to address it. For context here, so obviously she is a huge star, but her later career years of her career were marked by a very highly publicized struggles with addiction and a very tumultuous marriage, which I wasn't even like aware of her marriage, and how it often overshadowed her artistic legacy during her lifetime. Like, I guess it was interesting to watch because I really didn't understand or know that Whitney Houston was potentially seen as like a controversial figure. I guess that is just the thing that like time will do. And I think it's very tragic and horrible that she passed away. And I'm thankful now that I think people remember her more for her voice and for her incredible artistry more than they do these things, which I'm grateful for. But I don't know, were you aware of the criticisms around Whitney Houston at all?
No, not at all. Was not aware at all that there had been any controversy.
This interview was in 2002, and this is when she sat down with Diane Sawyer. She pretty much addressed like her marriage, her drug use. The interview was billed to be like this opportunity to tell her side, but it was this cross examination. A lot of the questions centered on her addiction, her parenting, like her daughter was a part of it for a little while, different rumors. Okay, so I don't know if like you've heard like the Whitney Houston quote, crack is whack, because like it got to the point where Diane Sawyer was like, what kind of drugs? Like, are you using crack? And Whitney Houston is almost offended if it's crack is cheap, like crack is whack. I don't use crack. Like,
oh my gosh.
I use better drugs. But the main thing that like she continued to claim was like, it's not an addiction problem. Like, I'm a rock star. Sorry, sex, drugs, rock and roll. That's the world that I live in. But I would say that crack is whack moment is infamous. And I've obviously, like, I had seen that quote. And I guess that line in that moment really did overshadow her musical legacy for a long time. And watching that interview was really interesting because I don't know, maybe people have different thoughts on how Diane Sawyer did, but it felt to me that she was trying to catch her and make her admit that she did something wrong. Another interesting thing of something that was brought up a lot was her weight loss and what she looked like. They were like showing videos and being like, at this like Michael Jackson concert, you were like really thin. People think you're anorexic. Like, what do you have to say about that? It was very not discreet at all with asking her these questions. And I'm going to put a little asterisk here of they were showing the pictures of like how people were seeing Whitney Houston as like scary thin. And it actually made me freak out because I was like, oh my gosh, like with the conversations that are happening right now with like women being thin and being like, no, that's just like her body, whatever. I'm like, the way Whitney Houston looked, she did look very thin, of course, but that is not so freakishly scary thin. Like I see thinner women than that on like my TikTok feed every day. And if anyone says concern, I don't know, like I've seen famous people look a lot thinner than that now. And so it's interesting that like her looking like that at that time like caused this like public outcry of what's wrong with her? She's abusing drugs. This is horrible. This is disgusting. When nowadays I feel like that's like what famous people look like. It was weird.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's actually, I feel like for that time period, heroin chic and everything was so in. And so for her to be like not as skinny as we're seeing people now, it's a little bit like, ooh.
Yeah.
That's a little alarming.
That's how I felt too. And I don't know, maybe I wasn't getting the right pictures. Like maybe there were photos of Whitney Houston at the time, not just in the one that they showed in the article that like were worse. I don't know. But again, like the Diane Sawyer asked her and gave her the opportunity to speak on the fact of, so are you anorexic? Do you have a drug problem? Like, how would you like to acknowledge this? And I like watching Whitney Houston, I feel like she answered the questions so, I genuinely can't think of another better word for it, but like, so iconically of just like almost, I don't know, she was so confident in the way she responded and was making jokes of it. I said, I mean, she went on to say crack is whack. She was like, how dare you accuse me of using cheap drugs? But I think that like an interesting thing in a conversation about is like treating this addiction and framing it as some moral failure. And I think that was something they were trying to attach to her, as well as like this obsession with her weight. And with how skinny she had gotten. And it was like feigning concern. But at the end of the day, I think it was like, how could you do this? Why are you doing this? And if anything, like whether that was coming directly from Diane Sawyer or just like what the commentary around it was at the time, it's really sad to see that it's like someone's really struggling. Why are you publicly condemning them and having calling them out in this like public form to, I don't know, make them answer for their crimes? It's an interesting way to say, hey, I'm worried about you. I think you need help.
Yeah, it's actually really sad too to think that like you could be struggling so bad and then the first thing that they need you to do is go on a talk show and be like scrutinized about every single thing in your life and answer to it in order to like make up for the fact that the public's worried about you. That's the solution. That's
Or it's like a way to, I don't know, serve penance for it. It's, oh, we'll forgive you if you do this like public shaming of owning up to your issues. And I think that's like what some of these turn into for me is it's, oh, okay, we can move on now because you like properly publicly humiliated yourself by having this moment. She also had her husband on at one time, and a lot of people were talking about, okay, maybe this is like a bad dynamic, maybe he's controlling. And again, like Diane Sawyer asked her point blank of, is this a bad relationship? And she, at the time of the interview, she like stood by her relationship. This interview was like a primetime ABC special and drew 12 million viewers. So they wanted to tune in to see what was going on with Whitney Houston. I found like just a Billboard article from that time that talked about how it was the most watched show of the night and actually drew 14.7 million US households. So
wow,
super interesting. Another thing that reading about this, so it's like in comparison, Jennifer Lopez's November 13th primetime interview that was also by Diane Sawyer had 11 million US households that watched. And it's interesting thing of just like another time where it was like public response to gossip because it was on that interview that I guess Jennifer Lopez admitted that she was engaged to Ben Affleck and gave details about the marriage proposal. So again, it's just another way, like we are just so nosy as human beings and we want to know what's going on and we want to make people answer for things. And it's funny how this is like a way to do it is with these talk show hosts through a prime time special. And like the journalistic approach I think is interesting. It's comparing it to like the style of like podcasts now. I think that's what people do, right? They go on podcast interviews, like Call Her Daddy's turned into it. And I think the main difference though from the interviews I watched is nowadays it seems pretty obvious that it's like these are pre-approved questions. And these ones there, I don't think they were. Like those talk show hosts were there to get the scoop and almost trying to expose them and trying to embarrass them. And I think that
every single time. Yeah, they were trying so hard to get them to answer whatever they possibly could to get the right answer out of them so that it could be the next viral thing. Like it was crazy the way that they would talk to these people sometimes.
And it's interesting how now it's like they try to get the viral moments in like different ways, but it's like the podcast, like they want special big guests. And so it's like the way that they secure that is by putting out the image that like they don't push their guests too much, that like they will put out exactly what the guest wants to so that people will agree to come on their show. And I think that's an interesting difference.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting difference. It makes me think of Dax Shepard's Armchair Expert episode he had with Jonathan Van Ness. Jonathan Van Ness came out afterwards and talked about how like he kind of got cornered by some of the questions that Dax Shepard was asking, some of the commentary he made, some of the things he said that he didn't find appropriate, and they ended up cutting it out of the episode. And he was like, I'm surprised he even aired the episode at all. But that's like an option that they have now, is that if things do kind of go awry, you can edit it.
True. And it's really quick and easy to do that. And it's an interesting standard of I'm a guest on your thing, so what I say goes, when I think maybe before it was switched, where it's we're interviewing you, so what we say go. So it's like a switch in power, I think.
Yeah. And these names were huge. Like Barbara Walters, Diane Sawyer, Connie Chung. Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah. These are big
not,
interviewers.
yeah. So I think they held a lot more of the power. And that's an
Right.
interesting thing now to see that switch with podcasts where it's like the guest maybe has a lot more power. And that's probably a reaction to a lot of this talk show culture that was created, is that people
Yeah.
then started refusing to go on talk shows.
Yep, absolutely.
So the next person I'm going to talk about is Tonya Harding, which, if you haven't heard the name before, she's a former American figure skater who rose to prominence in the late 1980s and early 1990s. She was the first American woman to land a triple axel in competition and became a two-time U.S. national championship. However, her entire career has been extremely overshadowed by this whole, it's not a controversy, it was an attack. But it's not really like a scandal. It was this horrible thing that happened. In 1994, there was an attack on her fellow skater, Nancy Kerrigan, who was from the U.S. Olympic team alongside Tonya Harding. And it happened to be carried out by associates of Tonya's ex-husband. And so even though she denied prior knowledge of the incident, because they were such heavy rivals and because the associates were the men who attacked Nancy Kerrigan were associated with her ex-husband, a lot of it got pinned on Tonya Harding, turning her into one of the most controversial figures in sports history. And I think she continues to hold a place in that as one of the most controversial sports figures. There was a lot of like media appearances at the time, but a lot of one-off like interviews of journalists pressing her for admissions, remorse, hoping for like emotional breakdowns, wanting her to show guilt for everything that had happened. There was also a lot of like class bias going on at the time. There, if you've seen the movie I, Tonya, a lot of that comes forward in that show. She was seen as white trash in comparison to a lot of her contemporaries, including Nancy Kerrigan, who was a lot more of the classic figure skater. And then Tonya was a little bit more rebellious in the sport. She came from a lower class family. She was a little bit more rough and volatile and not as much of a polished figure, and just different. She was just different at the time from the rest of them. And so in the wake of all of this, it made her a huge villain. And she sat down with Connie Chung right before the Olympics. And so it was right after the controversy. They hadn't decided yet if they were going to let her skate in the Olympics or not, based on everything. Oh. So this was, I think, like also an attempt to hopefully get some sympathy for her competing in the Olympics. She did go on to compete in the Olympics. She placed 8th. And Nancy Kerrigan also was able to compete and got a silver medal. So it ended on a note that everyone was very happy with, because they wanted Tonya to fail and they wanted Nancy to succeed, and they got what they wanted in the end. But that turned Tonya into more of a villain. And honestly, this entire interview was just awkward. I don't think Connie Chung didn't do a bad job. She was asking all the right questions, but Tonya Harding was a very awkward interviewee. You could tell she was trying to show a lot more emotion than I think she actually felt. And a lot of the answers, I think just because she'd been asked them so many times, felt so rehearsed. So I had no prior knowledge. I feel so horrible for her. And then it's all said with the same facial expression. So yeah, I don't think it helped her case at all. The most passionate she got about it was talking about competing at the Olympics and how prepared and how hard she'd been working for it, and how she was determined to go on and succeed, that she skated really well under pressure and was hoping to go on and medal at the Olympics that year, which sucks. So like she didn't.
Yeah.
Depending on how involved she really was. To this day, we still don't really know how much she knew about it or not. Depending on who you ask, it's a completely different narrative. Yeah. But yeah, I think this is one of those instances where the talk show didn't really do her any favors.
Yeah.
It drew 15 million viewers, but mostly, like I said, just confirmed she was messy. She cried, but then wasn't, and it was like really focused in on her face the whole time too. And it also wasn't helpful that it wasn't a very long interview. They had it interspersed with like commercial breaks and like calls to the segments that were coming next. So there was a lot of like breaks in between where they'd be like, and next up, we'll be talking about this. And so it made it feel choppier. And so I just don't feel like it was the right move for her at all. And it was one of those instances where I'm like, ooh, this probably hurt her more than helped her.
Probably hurt her. Dang it.
Yeah. And she's one of the other ones that like, it wasn't until later with I, Tonya and other retrospectives that opinions began to be reconsidered and people began to think, oh, this was a 23-year-old girl in a very abusive relationship who may not have known as much as a lot of people thought she was. And once again, super young, super crazy, like relationship that she was in created a very bad reputation really fast that wasn't fair to someone who probably didn't deserve as much as she got. Definitely did not deserve as much backlash as she got.
Yeah. Especially if she really didn't know anything about the attack. Like, sounds like she just had a crazy man in her life.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Huge shout out for anyone who hasn't seen I, Tonya with Margot Robbie. Like, definitely go watch it. It's so good. So I think it's definitely one that's worth watching. And it gives a lot more insight into her relationship that she had with her mom, her relationship she had with her husband. And she talked about that a little bit in the interview, but it's so hard because with what she was being accused of, in my opinion, was so much worse than what Monica Lewinsky was ever accused of.
Oh, absolutely.
Because Monica Lewinsky, it's like Monica Lewinsky, it was an extramarital affair, but like both parties are to blame. This one, it's did you or did you not have anything to do with someone trying to bash in the kneecaps of your Olympic
competitor? Like, that's crazy. Yeah.
So insane.
I agree.
So a lot more of that like backstory kind of fell flat because it was just did you or did you not have anything to do with this? And she wasn't really able to clearly answer that other than no, I didn't have anything to do with it. And it's okay. So,
are you going to tell us anything else? Yeah.
Yeah.
Dang.
So, no, it was interesting.
Dang.
I don't know if she did more talk show appearances at the time. This was the one I think that drew the most attention, especially with it being right before the Olympics and right at the height of the controversy. But yeah, it was interesting to see her responses to it and be like, even me, like having seen I, Tonya and knowing a lot more of the story, being like, oh, this did not.
Yeah.
This one as well as she hoped it would.
For the last interview we're going to talk about is the most recent one, and that's with Meghan Markle. If you don't know who Meghan Markle is, she's an American actress who gained international recognition when she married Prince Harry and became the Duchess of Sussex in 2018. Before she joined the royal family, she was best known for her role on the TV show Suits. But then as a royal, she focused on charitable initiatives related to women's empowerment, mental health, and social justice. However, following her and Prince Harry's decision to step away from their royal duties in 2020, whoa, that was a media storm when they stepped away. And I will say, I didn't really feel like I knew what was going on when that was all happening. Did you remember like following that story? Like, how much did you know about it when it was happening?
So I heard about it from a lot of the podcasts that I listened to, but I didn't sit down and invest myself in it. I haven't really been like a royal family follower. Like totally. I haven't seen The Crown. I don't like.
Me neither.
Yeah. So I wasn't like
me neither.
as invested in it, but I remember a lot of the viral clips like, were you silent or were you silenced?
Yep.
Yeah. And a lot of that stuff coming out of it and like hearing the whole racial aspects and stuff that she discussed. So I heard like the highlights.
Yes. I heard the highlights at the time. I didn't take the time to watch it when it was happening. Obviously, when Prince Harry and Meghan Markle decided to step away, people had a lot of thoughts about that. I'm sure the American and British thoughts were very different. In fact, I've seen that discussed of the difference between like how like American people would talk about Meghan Markle and then how like the British tabloids would. I would say that like the things that she was being accused of was first off, of course, like being a social climber, being divisive and difficult. And then also there was that bit of race discourse in the British press because Meghan Markle was not just a full British looking white person. So the two of them did a sit down interview with Oprah that was framed as this like huge confession. But I would say the interesting thing about watching that in live time is every single word that they said was so picked apart. And I think that it turned into this like credibility trial where she would talk about different revelations about racism within the royal family, talked about her own mental health struggles. And they were just like so critiqued line by line. And I think what's interesting is I think that rather than receiving it as like a testimony of like her actual lived experiences, they were like treated as like allegations that needed to be proved, everything that she said. And so there was a lot of debate around the system about everything that she had talked about, saying, oh, she's manipulative, she's dramatic, she's being dishonest, she was just trying to take Harry away, she's just bitter because she couldn't have all the money. And I think it definitely shifted the focus away from let's talk about the things that the royal family did that made them feel this way versus let's like, I don't know, assassinate her character and make all these assumptions about, oh, I bet she's just like manipulating Harry and she's this horrible, conniving, evil woman. And it was interesting to see that in like real time, like these two sides and the two ways that you could, I don't know, you could read this situation with Meghan Markle and Prince Harry. I think it's been interesting to see how the perspective has shifted, because I feel like at the time that they did that interview with Oprah in 2021, it was like, we just want to be left alone. We want to have a normal family. Then they've done a lot of public facing things since then. And so that has been like, oh, you didn't want that. You're having a podcast, you have a Netflix show, you have a book. Seems like maybe you do want those things. I don't know. I don't feel like that's fair, because I think there's a really big difference between being a public facing person and then being a part of the royal family. I could see that those are different duties when you're answering for yourself and your own projects versus what is in this like very institutionalized, been there for centuries, whatever it is. I don't know. I think that's like an interesting critique. But also, unfortunately, like I saw the clips from her Netflix show. Like I wasn't, I don't know. I don't want to speak meanly of a woman, but I wasn't particularly enraptured by her from what I could see. You know what I mean? So it's been interesting to see how the tides have shifted with the public perception of her.
No, I definitely think with Harry's book coming out, podcast deals that kind of fell through, but were like made news headlines. And then the show, like, not really being what people were expecting, and maybe turned a lot of what she said into something else, which is a bummer, because I think initially, like, they had a lot of the sympathy of the American public.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. And like, even still, like with everything that she said, I think that's their call and his call for his family. And I think it's who is Prince Harry's mom and what happened to her. I think it's very reasonable for him to say, no, actually, I want to put this boundary here. And I think that's impressive. And I've seen people even talk about, okay, he put his wife first, and that's something that obviously his dad couldn't do for his mom. And so that's a great thing if that's the case. But it is interesting to see how, that one. So that had 17.1 million viewers, this Oprah Winfrey, the confessional interview. And the narrative is shifting in real time of how people view them. And it's just been interesting to see that.
Yeah, no, it really has. That's definitely one that I think will be interesting, because the rest of them, it's still an ongoing, unlike the rest of them, it's still an ongoing story. So instead of looking back in like a retrospective, we're still going to see more of how that unfolds. And sadly, I do feel like a lot of people are like, maybe we'll find out if they were telling the truth. And it's, oh, that's sad that we don't believe them. But yeah, it is really interesting to watch that continue to unfold.
It is. And I definitely feel like I don't think she was lying about anything. And if anything, from the previous 3 interviews we talked about, is it seems we all eventually realize, we were being a little too hard on her. So it's just a shame that we can't ever apply those lessons in real time and be like, oh, you know what? In the past, we were a little bit too hard on people, and then we got more information and we realized we were being too hard on them. You know what? Let's not do that. Let's like try and give her the benefit of the doubt from the beginning. And unless we receive new information, we're going to keep giving this person the benefit of the doubt. And yeah, that doesn't happen, unfortunately.
For real, though. No, I agree. I guess that is the question then. Do you feel like women are treated differently? Well, duh. Why do you think women are treated differently in the media than men?
That's a really great point. I think that there is this ongoing, like this need for virtue in women. And if a woman falters or isn't what you expect her to be, it's like easier to like criticize that. Or it's, oh, but women are perfect and lovely and all of these things. So if they do something wrong, it's like people can't compute that. And it's no, everyone's a complicated person. People do wrong things. People do right things. So I don't know. Maybe that's like a part of it.
No, that's a really good point. I think that's something we'll be talking about a lot more with each of the episodes too, as we dive into the paparazzi and like TikToks and everything like that in the next couple of weeks. Like, why are women so targeted by the media and continue to be? And it is a lot of that. I think like the virtue signaling. She wasn't perfect. Okay, when have we ever expected anybody to be perfect? But
yeah,
we continue to.
Exactly. Even like going back to Whitney Houston, like the main issue was like, you do a lot of drugs, and it's what male rock star isn't doing a lot of drugs? Like, I think we all know that, but I don't think they've all had to answer to that publicly.
No. Are you kidding? With Monica Lewinsky's case, do you think we've put on trial every single man who's ever had an affair that's in the political sphere?
Yeah, exactly. Also, like, I have a feeling that wasn't Bill Clinton's first affair.
Probably not. I don't think you start with a 22-year-old White House intern, but
yeah, I don't know. Interesting. Yeah. That's a great question. What do you start with?
I don't know either, but
I'm very excited to, keep discussing women in media this month. Before we end, though, we have our mezzanine.
It's okay. The M is silent, so it's mezzanine.
This is a woman that we have talked about before, but as I've been like trying to be more intentional about, okay, let's like actually enjoy the art from some of these women that I've talked about. I got a book from Shirley Jackson, who is the original author of the book The Haunting of Hill House, which of course the Netflix show is inspired by. I got her book and read it, called Hangs a Man. And I just loved it. I only have 30 pages left, so I guess we'll see how the ending ends up. But I just think she was such a weird writer. And it's so fun for me to read books that came out in the like 40s and 50s and have it feel like it's so like twisted and modern. I don't know. I think it's really easy to think back to the 1950s and just imagine like the idyllic housewives and think, oh, everything was just perfect and pretty. And I don't know, like you think poodle skirts almost, right?
Yeah.
So to like read this book by this woman that came out, and the way that she does her characters and everything, like she's just weird and unsettling. And I feel so uncomfortable reading this book, but I loved it. So I want to shout out Shirley Jackson. And like I mentioned, she is an American writer known primarily for her works horror, mystery. Her writing career spanned over 2 decades, where she composed 6 novels, 2 memoirs, and more than 200 short stories. She was prolific in her short stories, which we've talked about. It's a lost art form that was a lot bigger in the 20th century because they'd be published in magazines. And she's just incredible. And reading that book, Hangs a Man, I really enjoyed it. So I would recommend. I've also read Haunting of Hill House, which is a very unsettling book as well. But I think this one, honestly, is even weirder than Hill House. It's like about a 17-year-old girl who like goes off to college. And trigger warning is that at the beginning of this book, like this 17-year-old gets sexually assaulted. And the thing that I think just Shirley Jackson did so well was just like capturing this moment with this 17-year-old girl, then seeing how it affects her mind. And like she was already like a weird girl, I'd say, and was like having conversations in her mind and kind of like having dark, twisted fantasies. And then when this like pivotal moment happens and then she goes off to college, like the way she's like navigating it and like thinking about herself and thinking about her relationships. Like, it is a weird horror book, and it's so all happening in this 17-year-old girl's internal world. And I think an author who is able to capture that so viscerally is just, yeah, it's incredible what she did. So I would recommend it. And I just had to shout out Shirley Jackson. I don't think she gets the credit that she deserves as a writer. And yeah, I feel like, I'm like, why aren't these books like considered the classics? Like, why isn't Haunting of Hill House a classic? I don't know if it's that like horror and mystery is like a little bit more lowbrow than other
Frankenstein
genres.
made it, so
that's true. Maybe not another 100 years, but I don't know. I really love Shirley Jackson as a writer, so I wanted to shout her out.
Because it's March Madness, this is just an extra call out that we are selling merch this whole month. And we'd really love it if you guys would join the Hysterical Society. Go get a shirt or a sweatshirt or a hoodie. They're so comfortable. And it's just for anyone who's ever been labeled as too dramatic, too emotional, too loud, too furious. So go check out our merch on our website. We'll be back next week with another episode about media madness.
We will. Bye.
Bye.